Alright, just making sure that we're all good to go here. Let's get to it, folks. Alright. Trying to make sure I don't have any delay or anything of the like. Yep, I do have a little bit of feedback. Let's fix that. Alright, and we're good. Hope everybody's doing well, by the way. Apologize for the slight delay that we had here, but got home from work late. A lot of that has to do with the fact that the national championship for college football is actually in town today. The game's being played at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We're not far away from there, so ran into a little bit of traffic on the way home. So this is mainly going to be just a discussion. Depending on how things progress with this radar, we might go into live coverage. But we're really going to be discussing everything that you're seeing on the map here. All of these pink and purple polygons over here, these are winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings that we'll be talking about. This, of course, is associated with that big storm that we're going to be, of course, watching occur over the deep south over the next couple of days here. Already unprecedented weather going on here today. Really, that's the best way to describe it. I don't think that my area over here got above 32 degrees at all today. And for the next 48 hours, it will likely continue to be below 32. Pretty surreal considering that we're as far south as we are and this is occurring. So it's pretty wild to think that we're really in this spot at this juncture. But anyway, though, we're going to go ahead and get into some model data here to go along with this. Now, some of the models haven't fully finished coming in yet. I'm particularly waiting on the Euro right now. But GFS is in. The Icon is in as well. We have a few others that we can work with. We're even going to look at a few convective models to go with this too. It's going to be very important to gather as much data as we can for this upcoming storm, because there is a heck of a lot of uncertainty as to who's getting what. And the final totals have constantly been changing along with the storm track. So a lot is likely to happen with this. Somebody is going to get stiffed up in all of this, and then there's going to be a big surprise for someone else as well through it all. But let's work with what we got here. I'm going to change things up a little bit here. We're going to put radar omega here in the small window. Going to put our weather model data in the large window here in just a moment. Like, hang on. Wow, timed it bad. Like so. There we go. But if you want to see what's going on with the radar, you can still see it down here in the bottom left corner. A little bit harder to see, but I'm trying to do the best I can just to keep you guys up to date. Like I said, not really a whole lot going on over there right now. So let's go ahead and get into the weather data though. So like I said, Euro just started doing its update here. It's probably going to take about 30-45 minutes. So like I said, just bear with me if you could. Help. That would be appreciated. Just like hitting that like button as well and hitting that subscribe button go with it. But in any case though, we're going to just pretty much jump right into it. We already know that it's going to be cold. We already know the pre-existing conditions ahead of the storm. We're seeing the manifestation of that said storm system in the Gulf, so let's just look at the preset maps, really. Let's start out with. Of course, we'll get into the totals and everything else beyond that point. But starting out, this is what we're dealing with currently. Time we get into the evening, we're going to start to see that well-defined rain-snow line begin to develop over towards Houston. Eventually, we'll see a transition towards all snow by the time we get towards the morning hours for the region. Then as we get over towards Louisiana, this is when we start to see the heavy snow begin to come into play here. And other areas towards the deep south are starting to get these little small feeder bands beginning to come in here. Now, do we get a lot of snow from these starting out? it's questionable because sometimes these do overperform. So you always have to be watchful of these. These little blobs that you're seeing right here could be feeder bands as well. But the big action, of course, is going to be towards New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and over towards the boot heel of Louisiana as we get into the morning tomorrow. So we move further along. Snow band kind of disassembles just a little bit, probably due to the fact that we do have a little bit of ridging occurring towards the deep south. And then also this low seems like it wants to try to deepen. It's not the most impressive low that I've seen, but nonetheless, this will ultimately affect who ends up getting what. But imagine this, and I've been saying this all week, the fact that we have such a strong DBZ signal from our snow here all the way towards the Florida Panhandle. This is just stuff that you don't see every day. It's really something to marvel at. And then, as we can see here, Atlanta, parts of Birmingham, big topic of debate as to whether or not we end up seeing wintry weather out of this as well. It's very questionable as to whether we see any accumulation from this at all as we get into Tuesday afternoon, or whether we get nothing. Honestly, either one, in my opinion, is possible. I'm really stuck on the fence here, if I'm being honest myself, looking at the weather models like I have over the last 10 days. It's just been really hard to hammer down any sort of anything in particular as a result of the outcome here. It's kind of hard to say that, yeah, we're going to get snow over here towards Birmingham or Talladega or Atlanta or just to the south of town here. Towards the further north you go, the less moisture there is available. So I don't think we're going to get a repeat of the last system. Then again, with the weather, anything's possible. I call it the best soap opera and the best natural soap opera for a reason, because you really do not know until it happens. But in any case here, one thing that I'm very confident in is we look towards far southern Georgia, parts of the Florida Panhandle. We're going to see a transition to where we end up seeing some icing here, and probably some significant icing at times as well. So I do have my share of concerns for this region here. Again, like I mentioned before, the fact that we're seeing these strong signals for both snow and ice toward these regions it's concerning, and rightfully so, because these areas are undoubtedly not used to it. If you thought you made fun of Atlanta for being shut down about 11 years ago over 1 or 2 inches of snow, I'm kind of concerned about these guys, not gonna lie. I do hope that everyone over here towards this region has done what they've needed to do to be properly prepared for this. And really, the main thing I'm hoping for is just for people to stay inside during this event. That's really the safest thing you can do. Even though my area personally isn't on the higher end of the spectrum, we're only under a winter weather advisory, I'm still off work tomorrow. It kind of sucks, but it's better than taking the risk of being stuck in something like this and things were to go wrong, which it easily can. In any case, though, let's keep it moving. We're going to go ahead and watch this head out of here as we get towards Wednesday morning. By that point, the concern will also be refreezing with anything that may melt over here, especially towards the South Carolina and Georgia coast, also Florida coast here, because there's going to be a point where we transition back into rain, especially over towards Jacksonville, by the time we get towards early Wednesday morning. Then, of course, we'll watch this move out, and then we're going to go ahead and compare another model and see what we have. What's different from the question that we're obviously trying to ask here is just what are we in for at this point? So what we're going to do next is we're going to pull up the HRRR here. Now this is a convective model, and these often will look a bit different from the model runs that I've just shown you here. These models are actually categorized. The GFS is what you consider to be a global or deterministic model, whereas with the HRRR, it's what's called a convective model. Convective models, a little bit more intricate, usually a bit more accurate, but never guaranteed, especially with winter events. Winter events are extremely difficult to forecast. Like, I can't stress enough just how much of a pain it can be. But in any case, though, we're going to have to use 18Z. It's a little bit out of date, but we don't have another model that's going to go to 48 hours, which is going to pretty much cover the duration of this event. So, of course, like I mentioned before, a little bit different here. Houston seems to get more in the way of freezing rain than they do snow in this instance here as we get into Tuesday morning. One thing that is almost a given based off every model that I've seen here is over towards New Orleans and the Boot Heel, Louisiana, over towards the marshlands. Looks like we get some big time snow here. Some very strong signals for snow nonetheless as well. So as we keep moving, look how far south that rain snow line is in comparison to what we saw in GFS here. So again, this is a big reason why there's so much uncertainty here. We just haven't really been able to get the models in the same kind of agreement like we did with the last storm. So the concerns are risen in particular because of that. But one thing that I have made note of here also is there seems like there is a slightly more northward trend also as far as the rain snow line is concerned. Again, like I said, depending on the moisture areas over toward areas like potentially Griffin, Georgia, LaGrange, or maybe even Tuscaloosa could have a shot at some winter reaction here. But again, like I mentioned before, wouldn't expect any totals to be similar to what we had with the last system where, let's say, Atlanta had 3 to 5 inches. I'm not expecting that in this case. But I wouldn't rule out the possibility of about maybe 1 inch of snow or more. But one common thread I've also seen between all of these models as well is over towards Jacksonville, Charleston. We're going to start out as snow and then transition over to a wintry mix, and a little bit of ice is also possible here too. Another area, those areas again, like I mentioned before, not super familiar when it comes to winter weather here. So I'm just hoping again that everything is being handled over there properly, because us in Atlanta, we learned our mistakes many a years ago. We learned from our mistakes many a years ago. And again, I've said it a few times publicly also that I was very proud of a lot of the areas around the city this time in regards to preparation for the upcoming winter storm. I think they've honestly prepared here even now, because they're already treating the roads, which is crazy. But let's hope the same stuff is going on over here. Houston, I mean, we already had that last storm to kind of mentally prepare here, so hopefully the same preparation is ongoing there. New Orleans, it's not your first rodeo, but it doesn't happen often. Hopefully these guys are doing well too. But again, it's really further off to the south, over towards Montgomery, Macon, Columbus, Maracus, Georgia, over, and all these other guys in between, over towards Charleston, Myrtle Beach, all the way up towards Wilmington, Cape Hatteras, Kitty Hawk, and more. It's those guys that I'm kind of concerned with. So let's go ahead and make a comparison again. We're going to use the NAM3 kilometer this time. Alright, so here's what the NAM3 kilometer is showing. Pretty similar deal to the HRRR. Rain snow line seems like it's a little further to the south here starting out. But that it has a little bit more in the way of moisture, so it's pushing that snow line a little bit further to the north. Again, a lot of questions to be had here with what the final outcome would be, but I can't rule out areas like Tuscaloosa and Atlanta just yet. Truthfully, I don't really expect as much from this system. Like I said, maybe an inch of snow could be possible, but I find it less likely, I would say. Hey, what's up, Emmanuel? You're hoping that this bust? Yeah, I mean, it could be a big problem. It could be a huge problem for them. So, I mean, while I'm sure a lot of people would be happy to see this, I just hope people are handling it well. So if that's where you're coming from there, I'm with you 100%. But I also have seen quite a few people that, that are actually looking forward to this as well. So I kind of have mixed feelings in the matter. Oh, I can only imagine. I'm not a fan either. I remember getting up this morning to go to work, and it was 15 degrees. And then the wind was blowing on top of that. I was like, oh, okay. Okay, we don't want that. We don't want that at all. Yeah, Mobile especially, out of the bunch. Mobile is definitely one of those standouts. Charleston is another one. Savannah, Georgia as well. Hopefully the salt trucks are going to be heading down there. I honestly, when I saw the salt down on the roads in my area today, I was kind of like, huh? I think that should be going on a little further to the south here. Again, like I said, I'm really hoping that these same preparations that we're seeing over here are happening further to the south. And I haven't been hearing a whole lot about that. So I'm a little concerned. I think, honestly, New Orleans should be okay. But we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully, like I said, with everywhere else, hopefully the same preparation we're seeing towards areas a little further to the north, like over towards Atlanta, we're seeing that down over towards Baton Rouge and New Orleans. But we'll have to see. Anyways, regardless of whether we're looking at the HRRR or the NAM 3 kilometer here, big time snow and also ice. I can't stress enough the concern I have with the ice here, especially over towards areas like Jacksonville. I've been seeing forecasts intermittently of where we're getting up to about quarter inch of ice, and for areas further to the south, that would be devastating. Yeah, I agree with you, Manuel. I do. Yeah, yeah, I agree with that 100%. And that's what I'm most concerned about is the ice. Everybody, some people downplay it too. Cough, cough, Florida. But yeah, some of these folks further down to the south will be like, ain't no big deal with the ice. Then you drive on it, it's a whole nother kind of animal, man. And half these guys don't even drive well in the rain too, especially over towards my area. In any case, though, watch this move out, and then of course we're good. Let's go ahead and go back to the deterministic side of things. We'll look at the icon next. And we'll go beyond that point. I'm hoping that the Euro has not fully loaded in, but loaded in far enough to where we can actually get a look at this thing. Now here's the interesting thing with the icon. The icon has a trend that's a little further to the south, but look at this ice trend that we also get to go along with this. This would be significant if this outcome were to occur here. So definitely have my concerns seeing signals like this still, but right now I'm a little bit skeptical as well. But also this shows some pretty impressive snow bands over here towards the Carolina coast as well as Georgia coast. So we got that snow and then we got the ice on top of it. Definitely could make for some treacherous conditions, especially in regards to travel Wednesday morning. Of course, by the time we get towards the afternoon into Thursday, it's not going to be much of an issue anymore at that point. So let's go ahead and check and see if the Euro has loaded far enough at the very least. And it looks like it has. So we'll go ahead and take a little look at what we have going on here. So we'll get going here. Obviously, Houston's the starting point. So one thing that, again, that kind of has me a little bit torn between the outcome here. The Euro, the GFS, a lot of the I would call them the deterministic or the global models for short, are kind of leaning towards more of a snow threat over there versus an ice threat. Look at the convective models like the HRRR, we're kind of leaning towards ice a bit more, and then eventually a slow transition to snow. But depending on what you get, that changes the impact significantly. One thing, again, that's seems to be pretty concrete is New Orleans and Baton Rouge getting heavy snow. And an interesting thing I've made note of, again, the global models are kind of leaning into that Atlanta, maybe also that potentially a Tuscaloosa setup as well, possibly. This could be right on the edge of the city limits here. Montgomery definitely gets a little bit of action there too. But also notice that there's not as much moisture over towards the south as well. So we end up having a little bit of snow at the leading edge of this question mark. So like I said, a lot of questions just still going. I still have a lot of questions here. I'm not going to lie. In regards to Charleston, that's another big question. The Euro has not helped me answer that here because from what I'm seeing, still looks like we could either get a significant snow band here, possibly coming along and giving an extra inch or two of snow ahead of the forecast that we're going to be seeing here in just a little bit, or we could end up getting a 1/4 inch ice out of this. Either scenario could honestly happen. Watch that head out, and really from that point onward, we're just dealing with more so cold air from this point. The winter weather factor kind of tapers off after this, at least for this week. Once we go further beyond, we'll discuss. Once we get into the totals and whatnot, we'll go further beyond. So, I think we've pretty much gone over most of the models in regards to precipitation. Really, it's the totals that I'm pretty sure a lot of you are interested in now. All right, so we're gonna go 71 hours on here, and we're gonna get a look at our totals and see. Here is our greatest point of interest over here. This is just outside New Orleans, potentially 6, maybe even some spots could sneak up all the way to about 8 inches of snow here. Over towards Houston, it's uncertain, but I would say 1 to 3 inches is a fair range at this point. And then look at this bullseye that pops up over here between Florida and Alabama here, also heading into Georgia, where we could easily get 3, potentially up to 5 inches of snow here. And then, again, once you get towards areas like Tuscaloosa, Atlanta, Montgomery, the totals kind of drop off a bit. Again, I really don't know how far north that moisture ends up making it with all that cold air. The thing is, the front itself is so strong that it's keeping that moisture kind of hampered down a little bit more. The last frontal boundary with the previous system was a bit weaker. So with that in mind, there's a lot we're going to be keeping an eye on here. Also, another thing that I haven't made as much mention of, made mention of it a few times though, is also the lake effect snow that we're going to be seeing here as well due to this big Arctic outbreak that we have. Winds are going to be coming in from the north. Those air temperatures are going to be much colder than those lake surface temperatures, and as a result, we could get some pretty significant snow over the course of the week here for these regions as well. So a lot we're going to be keeping an eye on here over the course of the next couple of days. So we go further along here, we get over towards areas like Charleston, Savannah, Georgia. Still could see about an inch of snow, which is very, again, even though these aren't the craziest totals you've ever seen, it's very rare for these areas. And then as this low begins to deepen as it's heading offshore, we get over towards the Cape Hatteras region and coastal North Carolina. We could start to get up towards the 2 to 4 inch range once again before all is said and done. So, like I said, a lot of moving parts. A lot depends on the storm track. It's pretty good confidence in it right now, but especially with me being an Atlanta native, I remember that 2014 Snowmageddon incident. And the thing about that was the track of the low shifted overnight. So again, even though we're in pretty close range at this point, this is still not set in stone. So I just want to make sure that I'm clarifying that and re-emphasizing that as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at our ice totals to go along with this. And we've seen a little bit of a drop off here in regards to the totals off this new model run. And that's actually good news. Because like I said, a 1/4 inch ice around these regions here would be devastating. Like the impacts I can't even begin to describe to you, because 1/4 inch ice at that point, you start dealing with not only the issues with the roads, but at that point the threat of power outages also becomes much more prevalent to go along with it. So a lot of hazards with those heavier totals of ice here. I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit on this one just to make sure that we aren't getting into that sneaky little 2/10 of an inch range or more. And lo and behold, this looks like it's just to the north of Jacksonville, right towards the Georgia-Florida line here, towards this little notch where we're getting towards that 2/10 of an inch range here. So this is going to be an area that I'm watching very, very closely. Oh, also, do want to pin that comment. Thank you for that, by the way, Torex. So one thing about it is, yeah, if you are going to be dealing with winter weather or extreme cold in general, which is still going to be a big problem, you of course want to be practicing the proper precautions, whether you're using your fireplace, heaters, whatever you may. Also plumbing as well. Leave those faucets dripping. Also, if you're using your space heater, make sure that you have proper, space from anything in front of the heater. Really?
And a low of 13 degrees. Also, there's a winter storm watch in effect from Tuesday, January 21st, 10 a.m. to Wednesday, January 22nd, 7 a.m.
Thanks, Alexa. Anyway, I guess I set it up at a specific time to do that. I need to turn that off somehow. I haven't been able to figure out how to turn that off. Anyway, what we're looking for in particular with this system, and also what I'm most concerned with here, is this corridor in particular, where I think we could sneak into that 1/4 inch mark for ice. As I mentioned before, 1/4 inch ice will cause power outages. Also, roads become very treacherous, almost impassable at this point. So, very interested to see what happens here in this corridor. Also have my share of concerns about it as well. Also, we'll go back to the snowfall totals here. We'll kind of shift back towards the west before all is said and done. Yeah, I expect to mainly just see snow flurries, truthfully, over here towards my area. There are some sneaky little corridors over here where we could get about an inch plus over towards the central part of Georgia here. Little area that could pop up over towards Alabama and Florida line, where we could easily also get towards the 2 to 4 inch range as well. So lastly, just go ahead and go back to the GFS here, and we'll kind of see what lies ahead with the weather pattern as a whole. And then of course, any questions that you might have, feel free to shoot. Alright, let's go back to forecast loop. Take this into the national view, and there we go. Oops. So there's one thing in particular that's kind of made me want to look beyond this point. And it's not just the fact that we're dealing with this winter storm, but also there's going to be a big pattern shift as we get towards the end of the month. There is going to be a warming trend. So we're at least at this point expected to go back towards average temperatures at some point before we end out January and head into February. However, depending on how strong that warming trend is, there may be other problems in the future. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of run this into motion here. We're going to go into the full range of this here. So as you can see, not a whole lot to talk about from the GFS in regards to precipitation. But notice these red lines, these are lines that are warmer. These are above the 32 degree line, which is this first blue line right here. The 540 line, by the way, is always the 32 degree line. But as you can see, as we get further along into this upcoming weekend, we get a nice little warming trend. There is still potential for a couple of winter storms here and there, but nothing of major significance as of right now. This is the closest thing I've seen to anything significant, and it's still not a concrete trend at this point. Some models are kind of showing it, others are not. So a lot of variability left to be left to be had with this. As we go further along, you can see that warm air is kind of the cold air is kind of hanging more so towards the north now. We're starting to get more in the way of showers and storms, which is kind of more typical for what we would get over towards the deep south. But right towards the end of the month here, does look like we get a good bit of ridging, and with that, while I won't guarantee it, I'm keeping my eyes open for maybe the potential of a severe weather setup down the line. And obviously at this range, that's hearsay. What we see on this model run right here could disappear by the time we get the next one, which would be at about midnight tonight. So a lot of variability in this forecast, in these forecasts that we have here, especially as we go 10 days and beyond. But just a couple of things I'm keeping an eye on. You think after the storm is over, winter is done for the south. I wouldn't go as far as to say that just yet. February does seem like it could be a really another wild card month, kind of like how this month has been. But I think we're going to be doing more in the way of flip-flopping in February versus January, where we could be switching more from warm to cold, at least towards this region. It really depends on how the warming trend goes. I think the further that we would go into February, the more likely we are to see an increased warming trend. But time will only tell. Because I remember when I looked at the January outlook, originally, good chunk of the southeast, and really just the south in general, and the entire lower 48, was showing above average temperatures. When we got the official outlook, which comes at the end of every month, so by the end of December, the entire eastern half of the lower 48 was below average. So one thing about it, and this has really been a great teacher for me in regards to that, is don't count your chickens before they hatch. After this, I wouldn't mind if we would get some slightly warmer weather, getting into the 40s, the 50s, maybe even some 60s sprinkled in. But as of right now, I don't want to get my hopes up, and I don't want to get anyone else's hopes up. Let's go and take a look at the temperatures while we're at it here, because I'm sure this is what everyone wants to see. It's regardless of whether you're getting winter weather or not. So obviously, no one's really escaping it over the course of the next couple of days here, unfortunately. Maybe towards far southern Florida, you might get lucky. Get some 70s and some 80s there. But outside of that, it's cold across the board. Yeah, 40. Yeah, it depends on where you are, man. 40s and 50s are right about around winter temperatures for us. For me, I don't hate that at all. I like those temperatures. Cold enough for me to feel the briskness of the air, but not overwhelming to the point where if I sit there for about 5 seconds, I feel like I'm going to freeze my fingers off, like I did today. Literally just at work, I was standing there for 1 second just to get something out of the van, and I felt miserable. But yeah, as far as 40 and 50 is concerned, love being in it. Hi, Vivi. All right, but the warming trend we do have coming after this weekend, this actually looks pretty nice, especially as you get towards Texas, which is an area that's been really frigid over these last couple of events. Also, we've had a good bit of snow over here, starting to get into the 60s, so that snow is going to melt eventually. we do start to see that little warm nose work its way into the deep south. So we start to see those 50s and 60s that I was talking about there too. And we also have Florida starting to look like Florida again, where the entire state's getting into the 60s and 70s. I remember, I don't know if Beck's still here, but I remember you were saying earlier that Florida's not feeling like Florida, and I don't love it. Well, change is coming, my friend. That's all I'm going to say there. And then as we go further beyond, cold air does try to come back, but it's not going to be anything like what it was before. And these events aren't going to be quite as long in duration as these last couple. Eventually, we do see a very notable warming trend as we get towards the beginning of next month here. And again, this is why I'm kind of curious about the severe weather threat. I mainly think it would be relegated towards the Gulf Coast based off of these looks alone. However, I do have some questions in regards to some of the other dynamics, but obviously being as far out of range that we are, I'm not really going to make a big push on that right now, because these trends can easily go out the window, as I've mentioned a couple times before in this stream. So like I said, have my share of questions with this. We'll just have to wait and see how things turn out with this before all is said and done. Does anyone, but that's pretty much all that I have here on this end. But if anyone has any questions they want to ask me, or if there's any concerns you have about your area, or if you want to know the specifics for your area, feel free to shoot in the chat here. We'll hang out for a little bit. Oh, that's not what I wanted. This is, though. We still got a little bit of time, Fiona. But glad to have you here. Thanks for saying hello. Baton Rouge. Okay. Let's go back to Baton Rouge. Oops, not what I wanted here. A little incoming box sounding that I didn't mean to even pull up. Do you have any sort of model that you want to look at on here, Torex? Because there's plenty to choose from, I'll put it that way. We have the GFS, we have the Euro, we have all the convective models in range now. Oh, you want to look at the crazy one. So you want to look at the NAM. The NAM's always in like nuke slab blizzard mode. There you go, look at that. Sheesh, that's bad. But yeah, NAM's showing insanity on there as usual. Am I really surprised by it? Truthfully, no. Not at all. Not at all surprised to see that. Yeah, the NAM always shows madness. And hence why I rarely use it, if I'm being honest. But then again, sometimes it is right. I actually want to get a sounding over here. Also, just so anyone is interested, this is a classic skew tee for winter weather here. Classic snow skew tee. Or southern snow, I should say. Yeah, myself and Kyle, he's not here obviously right now, but myself and Kyle, we kind of been talking about that, especially once I saw the first February outlook issued earlier. So with that warming trend, I was kind of thinking to myself, got to keep an eye out for that. All right, so do I dare look at what the totals could be with this model? Because I can tell that this is probably just going to be pure madness here. Look at the Cucchiera ratio, of course. Also, to anyone that does read these forecast models and like post them or anything, always make sure that you are looking at the Cucchiera ratio versus the 10-to-1. The 10-to-1 ratio is usually overdone by a long shot. South of Waco. Yeah, it's getting started. Yeah, if you look on Radar Omega, you can actually see it right now. There's a little bit of flurries coming down right now. So that's not surprising at all. Look at that. There's a little pocket right here, right towards south central Louisiana, where we get possibly up to a foot of snow. Thank goodness I don't have a lot of faith in the NAM's totals because they're often overdone, but that is impressive. Considering the fact that the mean, though, is still close to about 6 to 8 inches. I mean, it's not completely out the question here. So, it's one of those things. Also, another thing to remember, if that front weakens any at all as this low pressure is approaching, this still changes. So, a lot to think about still. Okay. So we'll go 27 hours here. We'll do some model comparisons. I mean, it's not the best data collection, but compare that to the 10-to-1 though. It's better than what we have. I think there's another ratio that might be out right now, but I don't have access to it currently. I think I'm trying to remember. I think Weatherbell might have it, but I can't afford Weatherbell right now, so I'm just kind of making do with what I have available to me. But Cucchiera is pretty good. Or Cucchiera. But yeah, this is how you spell it right here, bud. Right over here. See, this is why I only use the Blender models, because these other models are great for picking up precipitation, but picking up snowfall totals, I always question it. Because this is madness here from the GFS, but not something that I didn't expect to see. GFS is always very aggressive on snow totals. So here we are, 8 inches here with HRRR, and that's why I said like I have the most confidence in that, is because when I look at something like HRRR, which is usually pretty, I would say like conservative, one of the more conservative models, you're seeing a total like that. That's saying something. That's a statement being made, truthfully. NAM, of course, we already saw that. NAM 3K is really impressive as well. About 6 to 8 inches, which, again, is pretty much the mean at this point. British model's kind of leaning a little bit further to the south with this, which I find interesting. It's expensive, but it's a one-timer. Something to think about. I'm trying to think of. I would honestly love to get to a point where I would be able to get WSV3, but we're a long ways from that. And truthfully, I'll probably want a whole new PC rig before I do that. Because I hear that WSV is very demanding as well. So there's that. Let's go shift over to the east here and do a little model comparison as well. Alright, so pretty much the same across the board here as far as these areas a little further off to the north. Bullseyes seem to be pretty much the same here. NAM, of course, being the most aggressive of the bunch. Some of the regional models like RAP, RDPS, and the UK, the British models basically, leaning a little further to the south here. Usually the less accurate of the bunch, but still showing a very aggressive signal across the same area. So I would consider that to be good agreement for the most part. Dallas looks like they're about to get hit with a nice little snowman on here in Radar Omega, by the way. Interesting stuff to happen here pretty soon. Okay, so very last thing that we're about to do here. We're going to go ahead and pull up the HRRR one last time. And we're just going to look at tonight. Because depending on how this goes, will determine what time we go live tomorrow, or if we actually just kind of keep things going. I think it's going to be more so overnight tonight when things kind of pick up over towards Houston and over towards New Orleans. My goal or my desire would be to more or less be able... I don't want to do that necessarily. I want to do this right here. There. So we're just trying to hash out the timing here. So as we know already, we're starting to get impacts occurring over here towards Texas, especially just outside of Houston at this point, especially off to the west. So getting to the overnight here, of course, this is when we start to see that snow begin to develop over towards New Orleans. By the time we get into the early morning, that's when things really kind of pick up at this point. Alright, so by 9, 10 o'clock is when we start to get that heavy snow. So maybe during the 9 or 10 o'clock time frame is when I'll be going live. And I'll probably just hang out for several hours there, at least in that regard. So that's probably going to be the move we make, and then we'll just kind of hang around throughout the day and just kind of discuss things from that point. Right now, I guess we're just kind of in a wait and see mode in regards to what happens next. Do think Louisiana, though, is going to be the big winner in regards to the snowfall totals. Again, I do think there could be some surprises over towards southern Alabama, maybe Georgia as well. But this really over here towards the boot heel, towards Baton Rouge and New Orleans seems to be the bullseye, so to speak, here. It's the point of emphasis, if you will. That being said, I think that's all we got here. That FAFO phase. Well, that's all I got for you guys in regards to this discussion here. Appreciate you all tuning in, and I will see you guys in the next one. You guys take care. Have a good night. Until tomorrow morning. I did this at an awkward time. But yeah, later, guys.